rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran.
Iran shot down an unmanned U.S. military drone.
Pentagon released some video, the first evidence.
یک فروند پهپاد جاسوسی آمریکا را در سواحل هرمزگان سرنگون کرد.
On 20th of June 2019, tension between the United States of America and Iran skyrocketed after Iran shot down an unmanned US military drone. Soon after, the Iranians posted a video that purported to show the shootdown, and the United States acknowledged having lost an RQ-4A Global Hawk drone. The two countries, however, continued to disagree about where the drone was shot down, over international waters or in Iranian airspace.
The drone was in international waters, clearly. We have it all documented. It's documented scientifically, not just words. And they made a very bad mistake.
In the hours that followed, while the entire world looked at the two adversaries, hoping that they would practice restraint,
the world cannot afford a major conflict in that area. I think it's important that all parties exercise maximum restraint and avoid any action that could inflame the situation.
Iran and USA came dangerously close to a direct armed conflict. The United States prepared contingency plans for military strikes against 3 targets in Iran and escalated their military deployment in the Gulf. But at the last minute, US President Trump called it off.
If we do it, I'll do this.
Things would have happened to a point where you wouldn't turn back or couldn't turn back. So they came and they said, sir, we're ready to go. We'd like a decision. I said, I want to know something before you go. How many people will be killed? In this case, Iranians. I said, how many people are going to be killed? Sir, I'd like to get back to you on that. Great people, these generals. They said, came back, said, sir, approximately 150. And I thought about it for a second. And I said, you know what? They shot down an unmanned drone, plane, whatever you want to call it. And here we are sitting with 150 dead people. That would have taken place probably within a half an hour after I said go ahead. Yeah. And I didn't like it. I didn't think it was proportionate.
Crisis is not new. The crisis has been on, off and on, and the Americans have been always encroaching into the Iranian territories to provoke and created the havoc even during the Saddam Hussein regime, where the first Gulf War was taking place, where the Americans took side with the Iraqi Saddam Hussein, whom they have removed later. And for 8 years of war, where 1 million people died in both sides, it was very difficult to win a war. So then they have reached an agreement, they came back to the status quo. So you can imagine the amount of destruction have taken place. Ever since the Iranians have suffered at the hand of the American presences there. You remember also 1988, where the civilian airline was shot down by the American over the Persian Gulf, and where the Americans said and admitted later that it was done a grave mistake, though they have not apologized. So I think the issue has been off and on, and America always wanted to see there is some kind of a scary character in the region to retain its influence in the Gulf. Americans see itself as the custodian of the GCC country. Therefore, any country which is trying to encroach or trying to have its influence taken away from the United States will always face with forces. Even USSR could not do it, so I don't think Iran will be able to do it. So US always have looked at these issues.
Iran and USA haven't historically shared great relations. The suspicions are mutual. Did the CIA help with the 1953 coup? Is Iran justified in thinking the US aggressively backed Saddam during the 10-year Iran-Iraq war? In 1979, when the revolution took place in Iran, the US embassy was run over and Americans kept hostage for almost 1.5 years. With this history, it was a breakthrough when Iran was able to come to an agreement with the Obama administration on its nuclear program. There was hope that the two nations would finally be friends. However, this hope collapsed under what many call the eccentric leadership of US President Donald Trump. Ever since he was a presidential primary candidate, Donald Trump never minced words on Iran.
The Iran deal
was one of the worst and most one-sided transactions
I've ever seen drawn by anybody.
ever.
And I mean never.
Frankly,
It was totally one-sided. It should have never been made.
believe me,
Wherever there's trouble, Yemen, Syria, no matter where you have it, Iran is behind it. Today I am announcing our strategy to ensure that Iran never, ever, and I mean never, acquires a nuclear weapon. They restart their nuclear program, they will have bigger problems than they have ever had before. Big problems. I can tell you that. And we'll see what phase 2 is. Phase 2 might be positive and it might be very negative. But I will say, if Iran threatens us in any way, they will pay a price like few countries have ever paid.
During his campaign, Donald Trump had denounced the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action as the worst deal ever negotiated and a disaster that could lead to a nuclear holocaust. On 8th of May 2018, the Trump administration finally pulled USA out of the agreement, fulfilling a campaign promise to scrap the Obama-era agreement. President Trump did this overlooking objections from members of his own cabinet and the US's European allies.
If I allowed this deal to stand, there would soon be a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Not only does the deal fail to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions, but it also fails to address the regime's development of ballistic missiles that could deliver nuclear warheads. Therefore, I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
The announcement marked a decisive break from the nuclear deal that the US had agreed in July 2015, along with its main European partners, as well as Russia, China, and Iran. The deal was that Tehran agreed to significant curbs on its nuclear program in return for sanctions relief. Barack Obama, whose administration negotiated the deal, described Trump's violation of the agreement as a serious mistake.
بنابراین آمریکا رسما امشب اعلام کرد که به تعهدات بین المللی توجهی ندارد.
There is no more unipolarity. So there is no more exceptionalism and unilateralism in international politics. You have to accept it. It's a multipolar world. You need to accept the other point of view of the rest of the world. So therefore, when you're pulling out of an agreement, international agreement, agreed by everybody, the European till date, they are opposing because they know that the IAEA have already admitted that there is no violation from the Iranian. The European also have their observers inside. They said there is no violation. So why to pull out? And that was the best deal they could reach because Iran will never be able to make a nuclear bomb, even if they think about it. The deal was such a tight deal for them. Trump wanted to prove that he is the new president of new America, of America First policy. That is why everything of Obama era, if you look at the domestic issue, international issue, he erased everything. He pulled out of the TAFTA, he pulled out of the World WTO, he is pulling out of the environment and the climate change, he is pulling out of the nuclear deal, he's threatening China, he's threatening Russia, he's threatening the rest of the world. I mean, which country is now happy with the United States under Mr. Trump presidency? Yet he is having his local audience, they are happy with his policy, and he wanted to prove to them that I am the president who made difference for you, elect me again. So he is heading for a new election next year.
Over the past few months, the US upped its military presence in the Middle East, announcing plans to send thousands of troops to the region. The US also blacklisted Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. On 25th of June 2019, the standoff took another dangerous lurch after the White House imposed a set of new stringent sanctions, including on Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Sanctions imposed through the executive order that I'm about to sign will deny the Supreme Leader and the Supreme Leader's office and those closely affiliated with him and the office access to key financial resources and support. The assets of Ayatollah Khomeini and his office will not be spared from the sanctions. These measures represent a strong and proportionate response to Iran's increasingly provocative actions. We will continue to increase pressure on Tehran until the regime abandons its dangerous activities and aspirations, including the pursuit of nuclear weapons, increased enrichment of uranium, development of ballistic missiles, engagement in and support for terrorism, fueling of foreign conflicts, and belligerent acts directed against the United States and its allies.
تحریم‌های اخیرش که تحریم در واقع اشخاص هست و شخصیت هست، اولا خلاف مقررات حقوق بین الملل است. ثانیاً نشانگر استیصال آمریکا است.
آمریکایی‌ها یه بار سر ما رو کلاه گشادی گذاشتن به نام برجام. از ما یه امتیاز گرفتن، ما رو پای میز مذاکره نشوندن که از اولش هم یه امتیازگیری بود. ما قطعاً نباید باز مجدداً پای میز مذاکره بنشینیم که بخوایم باج بدیم.
Iran has announced that unless Europeans step up to ease sanctions against Iran by the US, Iran will not adhere to certain elements of the nuclear deal, including the limits for stockpile of low-enriched uranium, and later on it might even start enriching uranium beyond the low-enriched threshold.
Now the remaining JCPOA participants, particularly the E3, must either prove their goodwill by taking timely, adequate, serious, and practical steps to preserve the JCPOA, which is now in critical condition, or, along with the US, accept the full responsibility for any possible consequences.
Iran is here saying, I am a victim of the coercive policy followed by the new administration in the US. It's nothing new for the Iranian. They have been under sanction for the last 40 years. All their assets in the United States have been frozen, all their money. The American wanted Iran to deal with the dollars. It's a petrodollars, it's a gas dollars, and they don't want them to sell with any currency. Even the American are asking the Iranian to pay and compensate for the war on Iraq, where Americans spent $7 trillion. So look at the matter which is publicly said and which is under the ground has been talking about. Behind the walls, behind this curtain, lots of story comes out to us. But when it publicly said, it is only anti-Iranian motives they are creating in the region, that they are making the whole Arab nations, especially the GCC, where their stooges are sitting across the table there, they're simply saying to them that, look, if tomorrow I pull out from here, Iran will invade you. So you pay me money. Though the domestic policy used to be the main issue for the American, but foreign policy as well plays a major role in deceiving the public about what the American doing. Because after all, the American president is comply by the deep state policy. When Trump pulled out of the attack on Iran, it was not because of the 150 people he was afraid they will be killed. No, because they told him we are not ready for a war. There is no question of a war.
After pulling out of the nuclear accord with Tehran in May 2018, the US reimposed sanctions on Iran, and that included boycott of Iranian oil. Some buyers, like India, were allowed to continue taking limited volumes of Iranian oil under a 6-month waiver. But in May 2019, the United States ended those exemptions, announcing that the countries that continued to buy Iranian oil would face sanctions. Escalating tensions between the US and Iran has sent oil prices shooting upwards. So how does this affect India, the world's third largest importer of crude? With the US and Iran flirting with war, India, which is heavily dependent on Middle Eastern oil, looks on with increasing apprehension.
It's very important for India to make sure that there is no war. Peace and tranquility should remain as a prime priority for any Indian government to talk with any American or talk with the rest of the world, not only in the human suffering, but also in their energy suffering geopolitically. So any problem in the region will have a direct impact on Indian future. India and China and the rest of Asia is an Asian century. These are the only economy which having the growth rate more than 5%. And if any war break on there, 80% of their oil import is from this part of the world. It will be a catastrophe if we are heading for more trouble, and it will be more difficult for the rest of the world if they are not able to put their foot to reshape the new world order.
Amid heightened threat perception, the Indian Navy is securing Indian crude oil carriers that are passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The new government in Delhi has also reached out to Saudi Arabia and the OPEC to ensure that they work to maintain crude prices at a reasonable level.
When we are abruptly stopping imports from a country from where we import 10% of our requirements, obviously it will have a lot of repercussions on the economy. Now, replacing Iran is not very easy because we are able to buy cheap oil from Iran. Iran gives us certain concessions regarding freight charges, insurance charges, and also we get a kind of a credit period of 60 days compared to around a month that we get with other countries. Now, what experts say is that Indian companies or Indian refineries who import the crude and use it for the retail business, they are going to collectively suffer by around 3,000 crore. So 3,000 crore is the extra amount they will have to cough up if they have to buy crude from other countries. Now, this is going to have a negative impact on our fiscal deficit because the more money we cough up for crude oil imports, the higher is going to be our fiscal deficit. In fact, there is an estimate that every $10 increase in crude oil prices will see the fiscal deficit increase by a corresponding 10 basis points.
Not just oil, India has other long-term strategic ties with Iran that may be impacted if India toes the US line. The most important deal between Tehran and Delhi involves the Chabahar port. India will have to balance its need for US friendship with that of Iran. The new Foreign Minister of India seems to have his task cut out.
The two leaders over here, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, as also Secretary Pompeo, discussed various aspects of ties between the two countries. Also, more importantly, on Iran, certainly there are areas where oil will not be imported for now, but Chabahar port remains critical, and India confident that that waiver will continue to remain.
We have a certain perspective on Iran, obviously, from where we are based, and the Secretary shared with me the American concerns on Iran. I would say, frankly, I guess both of us certainly came out much better informed of each other's concerns in that regard. In terms of common ground, though I used it for trade, we have common ground on energy as well. I mean, for us, it is important that any global energy supplies remain predictable, that they remain affordable. And I think that's a concern to which Secretary Pompeo was certainly very, very receptive. I think he understands that this is today the world's fifth largest economy, which imports 85% of its energy, a large part of it from the Gulf.
So for India's energy needs, we're working diligently to make sure that India is fully supplied with crude oil at a good price too, right? We know that matters, not just the fact that you have it, but it needs to be affordable energy. America cares about affordable energy for its citizens as well.
Mike Pompeo has assured India that it will not lose out by boycotting Iranian oil. He has assured that oil will be available at a reasonable rate. More than a diplomatic pitch, this does sound like a sales pitch. After all, not buying from Iran means India has to buy $15 billion worth of crude from someone. Think about that. Does it make business sense for Trump to first impose sanctions and then to take over the business?